if he wants to or not. Okay, now it's being recorded. Cool. So this is the third-party development for specifically Dark Forest, but hopefully eventually this can be applied to ZK Dungeon as well or other ZK games. This is fairly informal. We just kind of want to be guided by what people want to know for development. We are going to do a quick whirlwind of things that have been done and places like where you can get involved and start doing stuff for the game. But yeah, I just pulled up a few resources. We'll probably just tear through these and then open the floor to questions. Anybody interested about diving deep on something, we can dive deep. We're here for an hour, so well, another 50 minutes, so should be good.
So I guess, yeah, like what are all the extension points where you could extend Dark Forest? Is I guess where the overview you wanted to start at.
Make sure to talk loud enough to get in here.
Probably you're gonna have to come out in front of the thing. So
Speak louder.
this is about as long as I can speak.
These are the real lessons of third-party development.
So actually, let's start at the beginning, which is Dark Forest publishes NPM packages for types and utility functions, addresses, and everything. I think that's one of the bigger things that we brought to the project, and we're pretty proud of. Maybe Blaine can pop through a few of those and explain some, and then we'll jump into mine.
Okay. Yeah. So the Dark Forest package system are trying to split out client-side code into consumable things that plugin authors might need. For example, Doug's DF Snarker, which I pulled up right here. DF Snarker is a way for you to snark on like a server or something. And he uses the snarks package to pull down the Z keys and the WASM files so that people can snark. A lot of plugins use types, which are just generic types for the game, like planet levels or artifact types, things like that. So lots of plugins use that. And then the interesting one is contracts, which we'll get into a little more later.
Click into it though, it'll show the address.
Nope, it's broken right now.
That's why he's avoiding it. So yeah, what does the minimal Dark Forest look like if you were not in the game, you're making a third-party client or something like that? If you open up the other tab, and we'll just show what does absolute minimal look like with these NPM packages. This is what that would look like. I'm probably going to release this as like Dark Forest -minimal the next day or two. It's actually reverting, so it's kind of broken right now, but forget that. So you would bring in, actually, maybe I'll let Blaine get you're in front of it, but you can talk through the imports there.
It's just using that contracts package that Jake was talking about that has all the contract addresses that you need for Dark Forest. Hopefully that goes away with the diamond pattern, which we've been hearing a lot about this week, which is pretty cool. It imports TypeChain. TypeChain is a compiler that parses your Solidity code and then generates TypeScript bindings that would like create those contracts through Ethers.js, which you'll see he imported Ethers.js here. And then constants are just a bunch of constants that Dark Forest needs to do stuff.
And if you don't know, I mean, I'm guessing you do, Ethers talks to the blockchain through an RPC or your local RPC, but in this case, we're talking to the public RPC from XDAI with your burner secret, probably from the game that's already been whitelisted. So I just grabbed 2 of my planets from my game and threw them at the top there. And I made a little function that will move, well, actually it buys a hat, because that's important to buy hats. So after, yeah, Blaine, keep talking through it, I guess.
Which one? Wait, where were
Just
you
go right
with buy
there.
hat? So you obviously need a secret or a wallet initialized to make any calls. And like Jake said, you need it to be a whitelisted thing. So he's not doing any of like the, hey, whitelist this burner wallet. So you already have to have one enabled. And then what's really cool about TypeChain is that it gives you these factories. The factories just take a contract address and they already have like the ABI and everything bundled with them. So this will actually create a Dark Forest core contract publicly. And then once you have that, you have fully typed signatures. So like when you type Dark Forest core dot into your editor, it'll say like, it'll give you all the options like buy hat, move, etc. And it'll tell you the type signatures of all the arguments that need to be passed.
For this one, it's just to buy a hat, you give it the Planet ID hash, which has to become a big number. So we're gonna append the 0x to the front of it.
You should be importing Sardi.
Okay.
But yeah.
And then you have to give it the amount of money you want to spend. In this case, it's $1 because we're spending $1 on hat. It has to be available in the contract or it'll fail. So we give it one, or in this case, Ether, because that's the network unit. And then you just await hat, and I bought a hat with that command. That command worked perfectly. And then you can go in the game. You'll see all of a sudden a hat pops up on your planet. So again, this is the minimal you could possibly do
for scripting. That's like the minimal
outside of the
scripting.
clients and scripting, or
Yeah.
Evan's been talking about doing like TensorFlow type stuff. I think this would be a really good, cleanest, smallest entry point. It's kind of, I wrote this for him actually. Because you could see loading up TensorFlow here, and then you could see like iterating or like for looping, doing requests to the contracts to get the current state of the game every minute or something like that. And then that could be your reward function, which is like how many planets do I have, or how much silver do I have? Give that to TensorFlow, and then let it make actions that would then hopefully eventually learn to make good actions.
I do think we were doing a whirlwind, and it's already been 5 minutes on this, so we should move on.
So just really quickly though, the rest of that is making a move. So we do need a few more things. We need start constants and the world radius, and then we can go ahead and make a move in game from here in our script, moving 85% of our forces off of one planet to another planet.
If it's not veering too far off the plan, what do these type chain definitions look like for the Dark Forest core, for example?
So wait, do we ship? We don't ship it as part of the ETH. I can pull up.
Pull up your local.
So for Dark Forest, oh no, this is play to earn. But I can show one for the play to earn market.
Yeah.
So Broadcast Factory or Broadcast Market in here. Is this? Yeah, that's okay. Let's close this. So broadcastmarket.d.ts that turned our broadcastmarket.sol into these types. And what this is it makes an interface that extends ethers with all of the functions attached, a bunch of encoding stuff. Like most of that doesn't matter, but the thing that's interesting is the actual class that can be instantiated. Where is this? Which extends, so it's like our very specific class that extends the base contract from ethers. And this is where you end up having the function calls directly attached. So all of these are fully typed in your editor. And then Broadcast Market actually would also generate a factory because you can construct it. And this has the ABI embedded in it. It also has the bytecode, which is the reason why we don't ship these to the browser. We actually have a note to actually work with them to generate non-bytecode embedded versions. But this is where the factory extends the contract factory. You can deploy it. You can just call the constructor. But this is the interesting one where you can connect to it. So if it's already deployed, then you can connect to an address with your signer or provider, and it will do all the casting and everything for you, which is super nice.
Cool. So this is like the main way you interface with contracts.
Yep. And this you can do in Node or you can do in the browser. So yeah, and that was Jake's whole thing. The other thing, I mean, the thing that most people have probably interacted with is Dark Forest /plugins. And this is the plugins.zkga.me website. This is like a showcase of community plugins that are available that have been lightly reviewed to not steal your money, hopefully. We have like a couple of rules, like you can't use local storage because that's where the private secret is stored, or private key is stored. You can't use fetch really unless you're taking the input from somebody. So like Remote Snarker and the Remote Miner or Remote Explorer both take URLs from a user and use fetch, but we don't want like arbitrary, like you to send data somewhere else because maybe you're uploading somebody's secret somewhere. So we try to like kind of guard against some of that stuff. And we also don't really allow people to import modules that we kind of don't know or don't trust. So there's like a
Simple.
subset.
Jump into a simple one.
I was trying to think if we should do a simple one or if we should do like crawl, which has some imports. So a plugin is just a single file. It is allowed to import things from like CDNs. So we actually are able to import Dark Forest packages from a CDN that just proxies NPM. So this Skypack thing will proxy anything you request from it. And so here we pull in the empty address, we pull in all the planet type, planet level stuff.
We also enforce here that you have to be pulling in a package we've heard of, like some sort
Yep.
of top 100 package that like Preact or I don't know, something we've heard of like Dark Forest versus, because if it's Bob's package, that could also be stealing localhost and things like this.
Yeah, you could, especially if you control it, right? Then you could publish something new to steal somebody's information. So a plugin is very simple. A plugin is 3 or 4 methods. A constructor or I should say on a class. There's a constructor, so you can like set up all the stuff that you want to track. There's a render method that receives a DOM element. This is like, that DOM element is the thing that is rendered in a modal in the game. And you can attach stuff onto it. You can render basically a whole nother application inside of it. Or you can just use like DOM methods to change it. This one does quite a bit because it actually builds a decently complex UI, but that's just all DOM manipulation. The other methods that you can have is destroy if you need to do anything to clean up the plugin, and a draw method, which actually gives you a 2D rendering context to draw things on top of the game. So one of the embedded plugins with the game, I don't think I can get loaded in that quickly, maybe. One of the embedded plugins with the game is Rage Cage, which draws Nicolas Cage's face all on the game, on every planet. So yeah, that's kind of a tour of what a plugin looks like. You can do all sorts of stuff.
Just go like the filter, like the crawl filter. People,
The what one?
Just like the get my planets filter by. I think you were at the bottom where you were.
I don't know what you're talking about.
A little bit more above, right there, maybe like, so get all the planets in range of 1 planet with using 85% of your energy, let's say. Filter for the ones where it basically, so we want to attack in this case, I think. So we're looking for the owner to not be us, and we're looking whatever, I don't know what players includes owner. And player level be of a higher, a level higher than whatever's in the UI. So like higher level 3, and where the planet type is an asteroid or is a planet. And so that's kind of how we tend to, do a lot of our find X amount of planets, find my planets that do this, this, or that. And in this case, we're sorting them based on some distance to us. So that's kind of like almost all plugins are some version of that little loop right there, and then just presenting the data and adding a button to it.
So those are client plugins. I would say that probably one of the most complex client plugin is Doug's bot, which
There's a lot.
there's a lot of stuff here.
Not all of that's built.
I mean, it's still a lot of stuff. I don't know if you want to talk about kind of what this does.
Sure,
I can also pull up something if you want.
I can do a quick overview. So more or less, Dark Forest, you can think of all the planets and all the different places. A single planet can attack is just a big graph. You can do a little bit of math and figure out how do you time a bunch of attacks to land on a single planet at the same time. You can then initiate one overcharged attack from a single planet to another, which lets you kind of get around the incoming attack limit of 6 planet attacks. So I wrote this around version 4, and I've just kept updating it for each new round. This is also kind of the underlying library that powers the repeat attack plugin. And it's kind of always fun. I'll get like a message every once in a while, somebody who's kind of stumbled upon the repo, and I'm so excited to repurpose it. I know MJ has kind of taken some of the core architecture and repurposed it. But yeah, it's kind of the idea.
Sweet. Yeah, and so like I said, this is like one of the most complex client-side plugins. And Doug also wrote DF Snarker, which is like kind of a server side plus a client side component, but it's still not on chain. Then the other thing that Jake and I did in round 1 of version 6 is the broadcast market. And the broadcast market actually is the first contract-based plugin. So we were able to create a JavaScript plugin that also loaded a brand new contract into the Dark Forest game that gave you a whole nother way to play the game. At least that was our grand plan. But what this specifically did was you were able to broadcast a planet once every 24 hours. And our plugin allowed you to buy someone else's broadcast. So you could be like, if I want to reveal 10 of Doug's planets in 1 minute, I would post 10 requests and I would put like, I don't know, like a 1x die on them or something. And say, whoever reveals this planet for me will get 1x die. And I mean, people used it a little bit. What was really cool is that we actually used Dark Forest Core itself to prove that you weren't requesting an invalid planet. So you had to know a valid planet's X and Y to request that the planet be revealed at all. It was a neat little project, and it required us to write a lot of kind of infrastructure. DF plugin dev server basically was created so that I could work on this, and this allowed, or this has like the whole thing. So it's like solidity in the contracts. We have the broadcast market. It's, yeah, I mean, it's a 300 line solidity file. And then we have like hard hat tasks that do deployments. It does some, the deploy was actually one of my favorite things. So once the local node is spun up in hard hat, we do a bunch of stuff. We fork XDie to a given block number. That block number comes after I've initialized in the game. And then I can play the game as forked. So I'm like actually playing a real game with like, that had real people in it that I snapshotted at a point. And then I can act as though I'm playing the real game. I can deploy our contracts into my test net and test everything out. So I was able to develop the JavaScript client against basically the real game without deploying it to XDie itself until everything was done. This does require, so the problem with Dark Forest is that it's really based on right now. Like if you try to do anything from the past, everything gets messed up with like the time calculations and stuff. So the ethers, or not ethers, the hard hat node allows us to actually like increase the time to like right now. So you're able to like snapshot from Tuesday, snapshot the hard hat, or snapshot XDie, and then fast forward the time to right now, so that even though the game is playing from block whatever, it still thinks it's right now, which is pretty cool. And then we drip the players money so that they can do whatever they want. And the very bottom, we also start up the plugin dev server so that you can do your plugin development live. Did this load in? Hey, this did load in.
And what that means is you don't have to copy and paste back and forth between your typing and your built assets and the game plugin.
What else were you doing with the UVM? You added interval mining or something
So
at the bottom?
yes. Basically, we need so the hard hat node, I think by default doesn't kick out blocks if nothing happens, but we want blocks to happen because we're simulating the real game, right? So we have it so if we wanted to pick up a block every 6 seconds or something, kind of to pretend to be the XDie network. But by default, a lot of the chains will just not like only do a mine when a transaction comes in. They'll mine a block, just that.
Right.
Yeah, so that was actually because when you cancel a broadcast request, we allow somebody to claim it for another 512 blocks. And if you're only mining something when somebody sends an action, I can't just let it sit and count down the blocks. So we turn on interval mining so that those blocks count down, so I can test that behavior. Yeah, so this is actually a plugin that uses the draw method to draw on top of the universe.
And maybe edit play to earn to show how to.
I mean, editing play to earn is just this.
So instead of copying and pasting a built piece of code in constantly, the dev server that he just showed you just imports, and then I don't know, show the question dev too, maybe.
Well, I don't have it running, but yeah.
Breaking out, but just for example. But yeah, so you just put that one line, and now your plugin constantly is updated to your editor, and it's being built in the back end, so you can dev against a live game in your editor and be working on it. It's pretty. It was a really nice experience.
It was a pretty solid workflow. So yeah, I'll leave this open in case we need to do it. We had a lot of back and forth about how to do all of this stuff and like make it like as legit as we could. So like we put all of our listing fees and everything in the fine print. We put the contract address so they can view it on Block Scout. We linked the unminified code so people can like review the code that they are importing into their browser.
And by the way, you could copy paste that if you didn't trust us that, or you're not using the dev server when it goes live. So
if you don't trust this URL, you could copy and paste that code and it would work.
So you could audit it one time. It's not going to update itself in the back end unless you want it to, kind of thing. And then also it was really important to make a marketing page for the plugin. So this marketing page is also built out of the GitHub repo you just saw, so that people could understand what it was.
Yeah, so that's the website thing here. But yeah, so then plugins are just developed in plugins. There's way more JavaScript than Solidity code to make all of this like nice and work. This will probably eventually turn into like a contract plugin template. I think especially after last round where we improved a couple of the patterns, I think that we're getting to a point where this will be kind of where this will be a starter template for how to get the game running.
Yeah, I think success for us is seeing 2 or 3 plugins forked from this plugin with a new weird market that is way more better Solidity than I could write currently. That's my goal.
So I think that's a whirlwind. Obviously that took us 20 minutes, not 5, but happy to answer any questions about any of that. We can dive deep on anything, unless either of you have anything else to say about the third-party development experience environment. I would say the last piece is the subgraph, by the way. We didn't talk about the subgraph, but the subgraph is pretty sweet, if Jake does say so himself.
So we talked a lot about, especially as soon as I found this game, I'm like, it's kind of like EVE Online, right? And I know EVE Online players who play entirely out of a spreadsheet. That's like, it's completely hooked up and they're playing the game out of a spreadsheet. They're watching, forces come into different sectors and they're controlling their ships and people and resources in those sectors. To me, the graph was the obvious way to make that happen. And so with the graph, you can, with a couple little magic things that me and then Brian have done, by knowing exactly how the contracts work, we're able to encode and track all the different arrivals and departures of planets. The big problem with the game is that it is eventually consistent, I guess you'd say, or something like that. Like because the S curves on your planets are not being ticked in the contract, right? Like the contract's doesn't know how much energy a planet has at any given moment. It's only when an arrival comes that it fast forwards all the planets to where they should be, and then has them do the thing they were going to do, see who's wins, and applies it. So I tried to do a little bit of that math in the graph for you, so that even though it's not the ownership is resolved and tells you who the current owner of a planet is. So you can query and say, how many planets does a person have? Who, what are the stats of them? Do they have artifacts on them? That's all like queryable. And so for really heavy plugin use cases, this is the future, we think. And also just for future UIs, you could see a mobile UI, which pulls the graph endpoint every 30 seconds or a minute or something for incoming arrivals to your planets who are not owned by you. And now you have a way to pop notifications to your phone telling you you're being attacked. So yeah, this is, I think, the next place I'd love to see more development go into. If anybody is interested, ask us. And we're still trying to build more templates and things to make that more obvious. And actually, this was how we scored round 5. The previous version of this graph actually did the scoring for the awards of round 5. So it's fairly battle tested at this point.
Game 5. But yeah, this was my favorite example from last round is I want to find out how many mythic artifacts were mined or created in the entire game. And so I just wrote this simple little query. What you can do is like throw this into a JavaScript console, and then you'll have like the count. So there was 22 mythic artifacts created in the last round, which is an interesting data point, right? Because they were worth 30 million points each. 20 million points each. So like how much of everybody's score was by these 22? I know I had 2 of them, so.
Do you want to talk about that other artifact query that was so important last round?
The other artifact query.
Owner is.
So
what's something interesting about the graph is planets are not stored. So remember, there's infinite amount of planets, right? Although it's not because we have a range we can only get to, but technically it's infinite. And so the planets they're not in the contract. They're not stored until someone touches it. So the first time someone attempts to go to a planet, it goes in the database and there's no storage in the contract. So we actually kind of used this sneakily last round to look for planets which are owned by 00 and are a foundry and are very high level, which was someone, because if you don't know, it takes like, large artifact foundries take like 5 million to beat them down, beat the pirates down.
Took hours.
They take hours. But so you have to start beating it down at some point. But I don't think anyone knew this, but as soon as you started beating it down, I could see you do that. And so we were able to query and look for, and you still need enough map to find where this happened. But if you had a ton of map or knew people, you would know who was eating away, like little, where it was biting away at something they wanted 5 hours from now that was very important to them. So this was like data we were able to trade and sell.
Yeah, because you can also do you can filter by a bunch of different things. You can do planet type is foundry, or I guess we called it ruins, right? Or they called it ruins. And then planet level is greater than or equal to 7. Or I guess 6 created legendaries, right? We don't need the owner either. So you wouldn't necessarily know the X and Y, right? Like it doesn't keep the X and Y in the graph because that's hidden information. But we can see here that if the owner is 0, planet type is foundry, and the planet level 6 or greater, that means that somebody has attacked it, has not claimed it yet, but it is in the contract. So you could theoretically find mine for this location or something. You know that it exists.
Well, you could put a broadcast request on it.
Yeah, so what we did is we actually allowed people to put these IDs into broadcast market for round 2. So somebody could be like, oh, I know this planet exists in the universe and I want to know where it is. So I'm going to request a reveal on this ID. And then when somebody accepts that bounty and claims that X
tiny
die,
fish somewhere who's like, yes, I want $1 to keep playing the game. A tiny fish will earn $1 to give you $5,000 worth of information. If you consider whatever, maybe $1,000 or something, right? High level mythics are worth something on that level. So this was a really exciting thing that came out of last round.
yeah, I would say a high level foundry was probably worth 1 ETH last round. I had a 2.5 ETH offer on my 2, so.
Yeah, because this is only interesting because of the broadcast, right? Because otherwise you actually can't really do much.
Yeah.
The broadcast is what really tied this together and made this more than, well, I mean, I am aware, because like you said, you're theoretically aware there's a lot. And the fact that someone is now touching it only makes it marginally more useful information. Right. But now you have this, I call it the Ansible, because it's a shortcut for all communication.
And it lets you collude very cheaply to
Right.
find that, I'm looking for this thing, I'm offering $1 for it. And someone on the map, and again, people are fairly motivated to run the broadcast market because like if you see the button, click it and earn $1 or $5, you know, whatever people are offering.
Yeah, it's a soup because the experience is so straightforward. It's like, why not? And plus you might be
And
a
because
small
you have
fish.
so many small fish spread out amongst the universe.
Yeah,
One of
or,
those small
or you
fish
just like you have
sees-
other stuff you have to do anyway. You're not going to get it. You might as well earn some free like money or something. So
It's like a legitimate Nigerian prince.
One thing I'd like to add to this also is like Nick Olvin touched on this yesterday in his presentation, but a really powerful extension of this that uses some like more advanced ZK stuff is like right now when you broadcast a planet or when you put a bounty on, you are putting that bounty up. But once someone reveals that planet, that information is now known by everyone. So at least, you know, in my opinion, this is somewhat disincentivizing for someone to put up a bounty. But the really powerful thing about Nick's construction that he presented yesterday is that what it would do is it would allow for an extension of broadcast market where a seller can privately on-chain transact that coordinate data to a buyer. So what they could do is like the seller could, instead of publishing the coordinates out in the open for everyone to see, and now only the buyer is the only person who's paid for those coordinates, the seller can publish the coordinates encrypted with only the buyer's public key, verified with a ZK proof on chain, and then only the buyer is able to know that secret data. So that's just another kind of interesting combination of a few of the things we've seen this week.
Right. I mean, another thing, like it doesn't even necessarily need to be like sharing data or anything. Like the graph is just a great place for developing tools that for like intelligence gathering. So the one thing that I kind of hacked together that didn't really finish is DF Command Center. And what I did was I actually, for round 1, and it didn't really port very well to round 2, but for round 1, we were able to put in somebody's address. So I put in the first place person's wallet address and visualized their empire. And it turned out like he had 90% of his empire was level 3 asteroids or something like this. It was really interesting. And then I looked at like number 2, which was that neurons on that round. And his was skewed more heavily towards the bigger planets. And you can see like, oh, is there maybe an efficiency thing? Maybe like, and if you had this early enough in the game, you could snoop on the top X number of players and figure out what they were doing and then just take their strategies.
Like round 5, we were going for double pop mutations, you and I. And if you were watching closely, I mean, you could know that. Like you wouldn't know where I was, but you would say like, boy, he sure gets a lot. All of his planets are double pop. That's very interesting.
So and I had to do some stuff to make the graph work. I would pull this up, but like I said, it didn't really transition well to round 2. I guess I could check out before Brian updated that, huh? Can I?
Otherwise, we haven't had anything.
Yeah.
So as a corollary to what Brian said, if transacting broadcasts can become private, this would probably drive up demand on the broadcast market a lot because a lot of people might be requesting broadcasts on the same planet.
it could. I think it wouldn't actually drive it up that much. The main reason is like you have no guarantee at all of where it is by definition. So it's really like when you're more powerful, you're more like you're more likely to want to be broadcast because you just have more chance of actually like doing something with that information. So I actually don't think it will necessarily drive it up that much. You're right though, it will drive it up in the sense that multiple people who are playing the strategy will now pay for the same piece of information, whereas before it was one. So I think there's a couple of pieces. I think the amount of incentive you have to do it is still largely just a function of how powerful your like player is, because your player is weak is kind of no reason to care. But the redundancy in payment might actually, maybe I'm underestimating, maybe like 10 people would do it each time instead of one. It reminds me a little bit like, I don't know if you notice, like a lot of parking meters have switched from like you pay the meter directly to like you put in you pay at a machine and you put in your license plate. At least this is true in the Bay Area. And this is really smart because it means that the same parking space can now get paid for redundantly, whereas previously a parking meter could only literally make as much money as the amount of time per day. So that's like why cities should switch to this if they're trying to make more money. So that's like the real world analog of what I think is like occurring here. But the core demand, I think, is still largely a function of you got to have a pretty strong player and a lot of map for it to actually make sense to play this Foundry broadcast strategy, which probably some players did, but like I would estimate there's less than like 20 players around for which it's actually going to be that useful. If it's across the map, like it doesn't matter how powerful you are. That's the great thing about Dark Forest, right? Like it doesn't matter how powerful you are. If something's across the map, it's going to be not accessible to you. But maybe
But
some
still
people hold
sellable
it.
to the whale on that side of the map, though.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's an interesting point too. I guess like once you know the information, how do you resell that potentially? Are there interesting like resell markets? Or is like I can prove what quadrant of the universe it's in.
Yeah, I
Or
can
like
prove it's in your neighborhood.
or like there's always been that like Barry Whitehead's always had this like incremental data reveal like idea where it's like you pay for incremental bits of like literally incremental bits of the data to be revealed. So you like kind of get progress towards like getting the data. Now in some cases that doesn't make sense because like you just need 100% of the bits for the data to make sense. But here it actually does make sense. You can literally bit by bit increase the granularity of like where something is. And somebody who's like mining part of the map might decide they only want to pay partially because they've actually mined enough. Or I don't know. There's some interesting like resell stuff. Actually, I think that is kind of interesting. When you can privately buy the information, you can then privately like resell it in some way.
I'd like, yeah, the accessibility part is important. I would acknowledge that. But I think what's important to consider here is that so far only one example that has been given in how broadcasting can be useful, which is taking high-level foundries and thus giving a lot of score. To me, at least, or at least in my experience, even if a planet was across the map, like let's say in this situation it's a level 9 planet, it can send shitloads of stuff through your way. You can't do anything about it. I would still want to know what that planet is up to, so I can like let's say it has a photoid cannon on it, and then you're absolutely screwed if you move out. And for context, photoid cannons give a lot of speed and range, so you can't really respond to it, or it's very hard to respond to them because the attacks are very quick. I would still want to know when they're preparing that, or when they're massing up a lot of energy, so I know when I can move out and when I have to defend and stay cautious.
Another interesting thing is that there are two sides. Like some information you do want to keep, just like you want to buy and have to yourself. Some information you want to buy and expose to the world. Like maybe you do want to expose their level 9. So if they do launch a big attack from it, that their neighbors know about it and they can attack them in response, right? So maybe you do want to expose their empire or their big mothership homeworld to the entire universe, right? I did get round 1 working, by the way. So this is the visualization of the first place person's empire for round 1, where only harvesting silver mattered. I'm surprised he even had this many foundries.
How do you read the colors here?
I just randomly color coded it. I think I used Dark Forest's biome colors. But yeah, so it's just incrementing up. So it's like level 0, 1, 2, 3 planets.
Threes.
Yeah, and they're almost all asteroids. See.
That's interesting.
And then yeah, so this and then you just put somebody else's address in here to get a new another graph for how their empire looked. Yeah, so this is something that you can do with the graph. I am not good at data visualization, so I don't have really good ideas of like how to show things. Other pieces of data.
Plug in on my list that would need the graph. Although it needs a little slightly different version of the graph. I actually want a graph of transactions on XDAI. Something I have done, and when we won our round, is watch transaction counts like per day of a user, so I can kind of see when they fall asleep. Because even if they're doing a lot of automation, that's like a base level average of automation. Generally speaking, maybe it's a little bit more when they're awake. But there's usually all of their added manual stuff goes on top of that, so you can totally see a peak, which for 6 hours or 3 hours, you can totally see people who sleep for 3 hours at a time get back up, do a bunch of stuff, or go help the kids or go to work or something for a 4-hour chunk. And I literally did attack people and take planets and stuff while they slept. And so I think in the game, we would love to see in the game this, just for transaction time of day, over like an average over the day, week, or something like that, to see how active a person is.
That was actually something that I did last round, is that I tried to balance my automation with how much I was playing. So like my automation would not happen while I was manually playing. So maybe there would have been a dip actually. Maybe I wasn't as efficient as my automation, but I tried to not run the automation while I was manually playing. And then I would like leave the computer and I would let the silver harvest itself and stuff like that. So
you'd see like a heart rate of your automation every like 5 minutes or
May-
something.
yeah.
This would be the only thing that's happening.
probably, yeah.
Wow.
Did you guys parallelize the transactions? Like multiple transactions in a block?
Some of the clients did. You can, the
Yeah.
default client had one transaction per block.
Yeah, but by default, the
Yeah.
client tries to keep the
Well,
keep it down a little
the
bit.
client both keeps it down and has to balance because of the burner wallets. So yeah, basically to offload stuff for XDAI, they turned it down. People were turning it up and still running on the XDAI node, so I feel a little bad for them. But like
there were
I was also
before.
running my own node, and I cranked up I actually adjusted a bunch of different numbers to get the reads and writes to happen better in more parallel. But yeah, so like that's one of the cool things about, and the reason why I harp on I was trying to go to client. So the reason that I was harping on like the DAOs, because they weren't giving their code back, they were like forking and keeping stuff private, even though it was GPL, is because like if we look at the network here, we can actually see everything people are doing with their clients, right? Whereas if you are closed sourcing your thing, like nobody can learn from you, nobody can benefit from each other. So like the most common one,
Who's more stuff though?
I don't know, but
Find out then.
there's a bunch of stuff. Community plugins, Craig Morris. But where's Bears? Everybody was using Bears.
No, Ruscio was somebody else.
You don't see Bears for some reason. But you can see like, so OX Bear forked a client, and then I forked from them to make my changes. But Bear, I think it's because Bear probably has his in a branch. So there's a bunch of changes here. 26 commits ahead, 11 commits behind, right? So people are already forking this client and changing things like that to make things parallel. I think obviously that's only recommended if you're running your own nodes, because we don't want to pummel the XDAI load balancers, but
The public RPC is already getting overloaded.
yeah.
Doesn't need that.
So yeah, there's lots of really cool stuff that you can tweak in the internals of the client.
Yeah, and for that we say again, maybe some sort of conclusion here. Big thanks to the Dark Force team for being embracing open development like this. I mean, obviously, I don't think they would have been hostile to it, but like to get a lot of this, we had to ask. Like, sadly, this is maybe goes into our talk tomorrow, but we did have to ask. Well, we had to get them to modernize or modularize the packages, the NPM stuff. We did have to, for the reveal call, we had to get them to Facade, one of their libraries. So their library that does XY checking. That's just an internal feature of the. There's no reason to make that public. But except once it was public, we could do fun things. We could prove things about the contract. And so they've been, amazingly receptive and letting us work underfoot while they try and release like 3 new versions of the game while we're rebuilding their back end underneath, and we're just goofballs, so they don't know anybody. So the fact that they've been so helpful and responsive to us has been amazing.
Yeah, I would also say, I wanted to leave you with something really cool. So we launched this Dark Force local last week. Was it last week? 13 days ago, 2 weeks ago. And it is 3 commands to start your own Dark Forest game. And the coolest part about this is I highly recommend once you have it to go to darkforest.toml, the ETH directory, darkforest.toml, and do something like 8, 10, 12, and turn this up, crank this number up. And also let's do what is the syntax for a planet? Is it just XY?
No, I don't think so. It's a little bit
Yeah,
more.
I think it's complicated.
I wanted to add a 0, 0 though.
To look at a checked in total.
I'll look at this. Admin planet XY level, planet type, and
Grab one out of
I need all of these.
one of the arena branches.
Huh? Oh, I just want to do. So it's planet, I believe, or no, it's a double array. This, and then X0.
That
Planets.
updated. That's like arena 1.
So it's planets equal. This is false, right? We don't need it to be a valid location. This is true. So do that, and then so I cranked up, I changed the Perlin and the way the map looks. I upgraded the time to 10x speed, and I added a planet at 0, 0, and then run yarn start. Oh, this is gonna open my browser, isn't it? This is terrible.
Close your other game.
Huh? I didn't have the. Oh, I didn't have the other game closed. This is gonna open Safari though because of the open. Any questions while this is doing it? We're about out of time.
Zoom slowing down that.
Right.
file.
That's what I was thinking. The Solidity is taking forever.
Anything from you, Brian, while we close up?
No, this looks great. This is the first time I'm actually hearing about Blaine's strat where he balances his automation with his manual play. That's pretty awesome, and I didn't realize that people were looking that closely at transaction data. So
I mean, when it's like midnight and Iran's message you and says, "Are you offline?" because he's watching your transactions, you start to be a little paranoid.
yeah, it totally makes sense. Like this is definitely the logical conclusion of gameplay. Any questions from Philip or Kumail also who are here virtually, or Ivan or Mo?
Okay, so we should get a game shortly. I really wanted to show how fast the game is when you're set at 1,000. But yeah, all of this through one command, through editing one file and running one command, launching an arbitrary game, arbitrary rule set. This is Dark Forest as it is, as it's developed, as it's deployed. I think it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it'll be awesome to see like mini games pop up over time. You can be like, oh, I add this structure to the game, and then maybe the objective will be to like get from one end of the map to the other or something like that. And there'll be other like side fun games along with like the arena stuff that people are doing.
I really want lobbies to exist. I thought I had enough pieces that I could like clone the ABI, but they're all proxy contracts. So like you can't get the implementation address very easily, and then you can't really clone them. So you still have to like run a bunch of these commands or have a server or some CI or CD pipeline.
Or
Um,
fork the upstream. We could fork out the upgrade facade and then,
if you fork,
but we wanted to clone live games. We were hoping to lobby clone just the V6 universe and then change the initializers, which all that tonal stuff you've seen, those are initializers into the
Yeah.
contract. So we could take the live game and just make our version of it. It would actually work technically.
also local games are really fast. It's awesome.
Don't bloat.
Did I accidentally type a? Oh, there it'll work. How long will the MinC take with the zoom on? Brian, I'm gonna stop sharing just so this is a little faster.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll go ahead also and stop recording now and download the recording.
Cool.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. This